In prevention, we are all leaders. Whether you're leading a nationwide prevention initiative, facilitating statewide prevention community, you're a coalition coordinator, or a one-person shop, you are a prevention leader. How we show up and how we engage with others to create positive change takes all types of leadership. So sit back and enjoy these conversations with your fellow prevention leaders from across the globe who are sharing their lessons learned, best practices, and strategies for success. Welcome to episode 21 of the Prevention Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Clausen. So honored to have you all with us today. In today's episode, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Well, a lot of rooms, stigma. Stigma is toxic. No matter how many times we say it, we hear it, and repeat it, the truth is often ignored. Addiction is a disease. Those who suffer from substance, mental, or behavioral issues are often misjudged by society, even when their circumstances surrounding these illnesses are out of their control. Today, I've got the honor of speaking with somebody who has done that, been there, and is now on a mission to tackle the stigma of addiction and mental illness. His message is one that says, even when the world seems to be yours, there's room to fall. And even when that world seems to slip away, there is hope. Randy is a 10-year veteran of the NFL and the founder of Professional Athletes in Recovery and an author of a brand new book and bestseller, Off Center. Randy shares his personal and riveting story of having it all, playing the sport he loved, losing almost everything, and ultimately finding redemption and hope. Without further ado, Randy, it is an honor. Thank you for joining me on this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great opportunity, huh?
Oh, man, I am just thrilled to be chatting with you. For the listeners, I first met Randy back at the Drug Free America Foundation's 9th Annual Summit. He was on stage sharing his story, and I was in the audience. And there were moments where his story resonated so much with me that I got a little choked up and my eyeballs wanted to sweat a little bit because it took me back there. So I knew I just had to connect with this fella and talk with him.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for doing what you're doing. For our listeners, though, can we just start? Let's let them know a little bit about who the man is. The man, Randy Grimes.
The man. Wow.
Yes.
Well, I'm an East Texas kid, boy. Football wasn't religion. Religion was religion, but football was a close second. Growing up, my whole family was involved with it in one way or the other. I had a brother who was older and just as good as I was, who went off to play at Southern Arkansas. And everything just kind of revolved around football. And, it seems like football came easy for me. It's not something I had to work real hard at. It was just, it came easy. I had a great high school career. I could have gone and played anywhere. And back then it was the Southwest Conference, now it's the Big 12, but I could have gone to SMU, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, all those great schools. And I chose Baylor. I wanted to play for Coach Grant Taft and I had a sister there too. And being the good Baptist that I was, I wanted to make my mama proud, going to a big Baptist university. I met my wife the very first day of school, our freshman year. We got married after our junior year, and, things were just going great. I had a great college career. I was drafted in the second round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was the 45th player selected in 1983. And, things were going great. There was no indication at all of what lied ahead for me. And, I remember loading up that U-Haul with what little we had at Baylor in our little duplex we lived in, and heading out I-10 East to Tampa, Florida, to start my career in professional football, to start our family, and things were great. And I remember when I got to the Buck place, that was the name of our locker room there in Tampa. I had a locker next to this is my rookie year, and this is before training camp had even started. We were just in a mini camp right after the draft, and I had a locker right next to Leroy Selman. And Leroy Selman was that first great all-pro football player that I had watched on Sundays, for the last few years. And he was that first just great relationship with somebody that I admired, somebody that was an idol to me. And the first thing I learned from Leroy, from our many talks that we had, was that football was no longer a game. Now it was a job. And the second thing I learned from Leroy was you do whatever you have to stay out on that field, because if you're not out there in your position, somebody else was going to be. And I was not going to let that happen. And I'm sure Leroy didn't mean to take handfuls of pain pills every day to practice through the injuries and the nicks and different things that are going on physically, and to play through those same things. I'm sure he didn't mean that, but that's what I was willing to do. I wanted to be, or ways that I justified it were, I wanted to be the best center that ever played the game. I wanted that next big contract. I wanted to be all pro and be a Pro Bowler. I wanted to feed my family. These are ways that I justified it. And, also because I was getting it from the team doctors, the team trainers, I was getting it from teammates. We had a drug safe that was in the middle of the training room that was never locked, so you could just go get what you wanted. So those are ways that I justified it. And the crazy thing about it is, in the 8 years that this was going on, 8.5 years that this was going on, nobody ever came up to me and said, "Randy, why are you slurring your words?" Or, "Randy, why are you late for practice every day?" Or, "Randy, why are you nodding off in meetings?" Or "Why are you the last to leave the building every night and pills are missing out of the drug safe?" Nobody ever asked me those questions, because I was always playing good. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, So that was just, that was the culture back in the 80s and early 90s. I call it kind of that North Dallas 40, if you've ever seen that movie, kind of that culture where, you take that shot, or you take those pills, or you do whatever you have to stay out on the field. And I never expected to take what I was calling a necessary evil into my private life. And after I retired, the injuries just kept getting worse. The tolerance to the medication just kept getting higher. I needed more and more pills all the time. And life was spinning out of control when I didn't have those trainers and team doctors and teammates. And, basically it was, I didn't have that locker room anymore. I didn't have that camaraderie. I didn't have that accountability. I didn't have that playbook to look at anymore. When Sam Weiss was my last coach, and when he fired me, I knew I was done, because I'd gotten hurt the second half of that last season. And I couldn't even try out for anybody else. But I remember just raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door, and Randy Grimes, the football player, didn't exist anymore. And that was just throwing gasoline on an already raging dumpster fire that was that necessary evil, that was a full-blown addiction. And I struggled for many years after I left the game, trying to figure out who I was and where do I fit in and how can I contribute and what's my role now, because only thing I knew was putting on that uniform every day, or looking at that playbook every day.
Oh, no, it's beautiful, beautiful. With that identity piece, trying to figure out, Randy Grimes, a football player, you said was no more, and that struggle of figuring out who you are, who you want to be. I actually think you said throwing gasoline on a dumpster fire. That really hit me a lot too. When I got back from Iraq, I was struggling with post-traumatic stress and didn't even know I had suffered a traumatic brain injury because they really weren't talking about traumatic brain injuries back then. And I had all of these symptoms and struggles, and jumping right back into college, I just wanted to fit in. I thought folks would perceive me as this crazy war veteran, post-traumatic stress. He's broken. He's out there. All I wanted to do was fit in, but to the point where I lost my own identity and I didn't know who I was. And that just took my drinking and stretched out that struggle even longer and longer and longer. So I feel you on that identity piece. I do.
Yeah. And it happens a lot. I call it transitional trauma, and they say trauma is the root of all addiction, but it's not just athletes, it's first responders, it's veterans, it's people that retire, it's college kids who graduate from college and can't find a job. It's that transitional piece that, we as Americans, we don't do well with change. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, the first thing we do is self-medicate those feelings.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to reconnecting with your identity, what did that look like for you?
I think it was a matter of rediscovering who I was, and what my potential and talents were. It wasn't until 20 years later, while I was in rehab, that I finally grieved the death of Randy Grimes, the football player, and that was a real thing. I didn't even realize it, all those years of substance abuse and all the destruction I caused as a result of it. It wasn't until professional therapy got involved that I really grieved the death of that person, and I let that thing go, and I moved on and rediscovered myself through recovery. People ask me all the time what I miss most about football, and it's not the game. I miss the locker room. I miss the camaraderie. I miss the fellowship, the brotherhood. I miss being with like-minded people that have been to those same places that I've been, who sweated with me and cried with me and laughed with me and bled with me. That's what I miss, but that's what I found in recovery is a new locker room and a new playbook.
All of my military veterans that are listening are nodding right along with you. They might not miss the combat patrols or the hurry up and wait or embrace the suck, but it was the guys, the soldiers, the downtime, the ride in the back of the deuce and a half out to the range, cracking jokes with each other, just that camaraderie.
Calling each other out, yeah. And that's why even now I love putting veterans and first responders together with athletes as they go through this recovery process in a treatment center environment, because they're so good with each other. They do call each other out. They see right through the BS, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. It
is that together is better. I mean, it is got to have that support. Let's talk a little bit more. I'm curious about the impact of culture or the perception of those cultural norms and how that played into your story or is still playing into your story.
Can you define that a little more?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, returning back to college campus after my deployment, my perception of the norms, the culture, the college environment is drinking, going out to the bars. Weekend starts on Wednesday. Well, some might say Thursday. Depends on who you are. My perception of that culture helped drive or guide my behavior, my desire to fit in. Like, well, if I think that's the norm, I should do that because then I'll fit in. I'll be normal. But then also with the military, the embrace the suck. I was Army infantry. You don't cry in the infantry. You're just a bullet stopper.
Right.
I can remember the day I got hit with the IED and got blown up. That was when I had my traumatic brain injury, but we didn't know it. But the culture was brush yourself off. You good? Yep, you're good. Okay. I was back out on patrol that very next day. and the cultures around that in that sense.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel so inadequate talking about my addiction in professional football, and here you guys are out there, and that's real life and death stuff. You know, I mean, what you guys went through and what you still go through, you know, internally, it's so much more impactful and powerful than anything that I went through on the football field. But it's funny how it all leads us to the same place. You know, it all leads us to that really dark, deep pit. And, you know, like I said, I played in an era where it was pretty much acceptable, you know, pain pills, pain shots, steroids, all the different things was pretty acceptable back then. And, you know, I also played in an era where we beat the hell out of each other all week. And hopefully there was enough left in the tank to play on Sunday. That was also the mentality that if you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. You know, that kind of that Bear Bryant BS, junction boys kind of stuff. And so there was a lot of injuries that were sustained during the week. And I never understood that mentality. You know, the new collective bargaining agreement that the guys have now, they hardly ever put on the pads. They never practice hard during the week. And as a result, guys are having longer careers. There's fewer injuries. And, but I always look back and think, you know, that had a lot to do with cutting my career shorter than it should have been, were the injuries that I sustained with my own teammates. But, you know, with me, it was after grieving that death of Randy Grimes, the football player, for me, it was a matter of just accountability. You know, I needed to stay accountable to somebody every day. Somebody every day needed to see my eyes and hear my voice. And, you know, I just needed that for a really long time, even at 49 years old. You know, I was 49 when I got sober. And I had a family. I had kids in college. I had a daughter that was married. And I needed all that to get over this thing.
Can we just touch on that dark place and only really just setting the foundation for your growth and your new mission?
Well, I can remember the perfect storm was coming together in the summer of 2009. And I'd lost a very good friend that I played right next to for many years. He was my right guard, and his name was Tom McHale. And he was out there doing the exact same thing I was doing, and that was self-medicating his injuries he got while he played in the league. And one morning, he just didn't wake up. My daughter wouldn't let me come around my first grandchild because I wasn't fit to be around her new baby. My wife was leaving me because she couldn't, not that she didn't love me, but she just couldn't sit by and watch me continue to kill myself every day. I'd had a series of seizures as a result of benzodiazepine withdrawal. So I was having all these health concerns and trips to the emergency room and hospital stays and car wrecks. And, you know, just by the grace of God, I never killed anybody because I had a seizure as a result of withdrawal. So that perfect storm was all coming together. And that's when I finally put up my hand and asked for help. My wife was willing to make one more phone call for me that summer because she was so tired of the I'm sorry's and you're overreacting, you know, how I would turn it back on her and make it, you know, make it her issue. But she was willing to make one more call, and whoever she talked to at the league office in New York on Park Avenue, you know, back then they didn't have anything for former retired players, and whoever she talked to that day knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's how I got on that airplane to Fort Lauderdale, September 22nd, 2009. But, you know, when I pulled up to that treatment center, I was leaning against the door of this old dirty, black, beat-up town car. And I was so sick, man. I just remember being so sick. And somebody opened the door from the outside, and I just kind of fell out of it. And I had about another 30 or 40 feet to get through the door of the center there. And I just crawled on all fours, and nobody helped me. Nobody helped me get up. But, looking back, I always say that crawling through that door that night was my greatest accomplishment. Even over my birth of my children, my marriage, all the football accolades that I got and honors and stuff. My greatest accomplishment was crawling through the door, because if I don't do that night, if I don't crawl through that door, everything else was for nothing.
I'm just picturing that and speechless. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. And, one of your quotes actually comes to mind as a good segue. It's, I prayed that God would open up the doors of heaven and let me in. Instead, he opened up the gates of hell and let me out.
That's where I was, man. That's where that deep, dark place is. I can remember laying on the floor. This was also that summer of 2009. I can remember laying on the floor of the house that I had just lost in foreclosure as a result of the addiction. The new owners weren't going to take it over for another 90 days. So we had all the furniture moved out. And I can remember laying in the floor, and all I had was a blanket. I had a little box TV that was set on the floor too, because all the furniture was gone. The utilities were off. And I can remember laying on that floor and thinking, I'm a former All-American. I'm a former Pro Bowler. I married my sweetheart college cheerleader dream girl. I've got 2 great kids. At the time, I had a grandchild that was just born. I can remember thinking all this stuff, and here I am laying in the floor of a basically abandoned house with no utilities, no car, no job, no money. How did it get there? How did it get there so quick? And but that was the deepest, darkest place.
But you found strength and you found hope, and you kept hope. What did that journey to you, to who this man is sitting here before me today, what did that look like?
Took a lot of hard work. Took a lot of really good people who care about me, and people that had been to the same places that I'd been. It took a real community, and the difference is that I engaged. When I crawled in that door that night, I finally was given the gift of desperation, and I was desperate. And, I had a couple surgeries while I was in treatment. I had my right knee replaced. I had my left knee worked on. I had some neck surgery, and I came into treatment with a plan to get out of some of the pain that I was in. But Dave, I remember sitting at a picnic table. It was what I was going to come in. I was going to detox for a month. They were going to take it really slow because of all the seizures that I'd had. I was going to detox for a month. I was going to go off and have these surgeries. I was going to come back and detox from the hospital meds. And then I was going to go off and work on those underlying issues that made me do what I did. But I remember 2 weeks after crawling in the door that night, it was still in the detox phase. I was sitting at a picnic table in the middle of the treatment center campus, and for some reason, I would get up every morning. I had a big spiral notebook, and I would just kind of write down what was going on around me, how I was feeling. And I don't know why, because I'm not a big writer, but for some reason, it just made me feel better. And this particular morning, it was 8:45. It was 15 minutes before the first group was going to start. I was sitting at this picnic table, and I was sobbing uncontrollably. I could not get a handle on myself. I couldn't get myself under control. And I can't imagine what a 290-pound man looks like sobbing in the middle of a treatment center to the rest of the clients. But I just couldn't get a grip on myself, because for the first time in 20 plus years, I was having to deal with life on life's terms, sober, and thinking about here I was in West Palm Beach, and I was thinking about all the destruction that I left back in Houston with my family, my reputation, my finances, and my employment. And it was overwhelming. But it was also at that very second that all that was going on, and I was sobbing, and all these feelings going on. It was like somebody came up behind me and draped a warm quilt around my shoulder. And I say quilt because I remember feeling weight and warmth on me at that picnic table that morning at 8:45. And it was like, also at that very second, first of all, I was overwhelmed with confidence that I could do this, which was something that I didn't think I had. I struggled with that whole 2 weeks leading up to that. I had this overwhelming sense of confidence, but I also had this overwhelming sense of I needed to make it all mean something. Everything that I'd put everybody through, everything that I'd done with back home with like I said, my reputation and all, I had to make it all mean something. And that was kind of the birth of Athletes in Recovery right there. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew that I had to make it mean something. And I knew I had a lot of work to do on myself first. But I also knew that there was a lot of guys out there that I'd played with and against who were struggling in silence just like me. And it's with that same mentality that you talked about, that warrior mentality where, and it's how we were raised by our dads, because they were raised like that. But big boys don't cry. And you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you get back in the huddle, or you get back in the fight. That mentality that kept people from raising their hands and asking for help.
I'm just picturing that picnic table there in the middle of that treatment center, and just
that was my burning bush moment. That was my spiritual awakening to recovery right there. And the cool thing about it is, I got to pass that picnic table all the time for many years after that. But that's where it all came together for me.
And a little sidebar for the listeners: journaling. If you're not a writer, I just journal, just a brain dump. When it's just got to get stuff out. And actually, it's really helped me too. One of the things my dad told me before I went to Iraq, he said, take this journal and write down at the end of a bad day, a heavy day, just go ahead and write down whatever's on your mind, whatever's on your heart. And I still had that. And I was in a bummed out, dark place. And I pulled that out and just started writing. It is powerful. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got to share with you, if you're not a Simon Sinek fan, his Start With Why, I really worked to clarify my why behind just who I am and how I live. And it's to live and share a life of continued growth so that we can all overcome adversity and live a fulfilling life. But it's that live and share that really, to me, makes a big difference, because just like you said, we've got to share our stories, because there's other folks going through the same types of adversity, same types of challenges. Let them know that they're not alone.
That's one of the first things I learned about recovery, is that you've got to give it away in order to keep it.
Well, you mentioned Athletes in Recovery. Let's talk about that. Tell me more. What is Athletes in Recovery?
Well, it's like I said, when I came into treatment, there was no resources out there for former NFL players. So I started, after I did a ton of work on myself, and we're talking about a year later, I started working with the NFL. The NFL formed an organization called the Player Care Foundation. And we started going out and sharing our story and letting people know that there was resources and funding available for guys, because a lot of the guys that I was talking to had lost everything. They had completely gone through their finances. They had no insurance. and usually broken marriages or broken homes. And those are the kind of guys that I was dealing with, guys that had played in the league for many years. And as soon as I started telling my story, man, they started coming out of the woodwork. They realized they weren't alone, that they weren't the only ones out there struggling with this. And, over the last 11 and a half years, we've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of former NFL players. But Pro Athletes in Recovery was designed to just be a bridge between that player and resources. And, we were helping people get into treatment. Eventually, someday, I would love to help everybody get into treatment, raise that kind of money. But that's what it is right now. And not just for former NFL players, but Major League Baseball got involved with it. I started working with the baseball assistance team and the NHL and NBA. And pretty much, Dave, every sport you can think of that has an organization that supports their former players. Whether it's the Jockeys Guild, whether it's MMA fighters, whether it's PGA or the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association. We work with all those because we all have the same issues. We have chronic pain. We self-medicate that chronic pain because that's how we got through our careers. But it's also that we don't have that uniform to put on anymore, or that racket to pick up, or that horse to mount, And but I also don't want to box myself in and say that Pro Athletes in Recovery only works with athletes. We work with everybody. And, one of my favorite sayings is that when families get well, addicts get well. And I think that we're not going to legislate our way out of this pandemic, this drug addiction pandemic. We're not going to arrest our way out of it, but we can educate our way out of it. And so also Pro Athletes in Recovery does a lot of education, a lot of speaking in schools, a lot of town hall meetings. And so that's the purpose of that, is to just kind of spread the word that there is help and there's hope out there.
That family component is a beautiful, powerful component as well. I'm glad you brought that up, because another one of your quotes that I had just pulled and grabbed and held on to was that my family is an earlier version of heaven, full of forgiveness and where life begins and love never ends. Just beautiful, just beautiful.
Well, and it took my whole family, and the book Off Center was a family project, but it was also a healing process for the Grimes family. So it's already served its purpose, whether I sell a copy or not. But everybody in my family that was affected by it, which was everybody, they had a platform in it, they had a piece in it, and so that's what I'm most proud about. It really did accomplish that.
Tell me more about the book.
The book is a 3-year labor of love, that's for sure. The COVID pandemic didn't help any, but I poured my heart out into 234 pages, and so did my family. And I'm telling my story, everything that we've talked about today, through the eyes of an intervention that's going on. And the reason I wanted to do that was because I wanted people to see the different characters that are involved in the family unit. You've got the classic enablers, the classic codependents. You've got the ones that don't believe the disease model and think it's a moral failing. You've got those with stigma that don't want to deal with it. They think that if they just don't acknowledge it, it'll go away. So there's something for everybody in this book. And I'm really proud of the way it turned out. And the reviews have been awesome. You can get to it by going to Amazon.com, or you can just go to offcenterthebook.com, and it'll throw up a link that you can that you can buy the book on, but I'm really proud of it. The reviews have been awesome. And it's only been out since February the 8th.
It already climbed to the bestseller list. Definitely worth a read. And I will put a link in the show notes for y'all as well. There'll be a handful of links in there. But when you say that the book was a family project, piqued my interest there. What do you mean by family project?
Well, everybody had a part in it. And my children wrote me letters while I was in treatment. And they were pretty brutal, because they had been through a lot and they had seen a lot. They were embarrassed a lot with their friends. They didn't understand, and they allowed me to print those letters in the book. But also, you get to see what addiction looks like through the eyes of a 16-year-old, through the eyes of a 21-year-old or a 23-year-old who just got married and had a baby. You get to see what it looks like from my wife's point of view and everything that she went through. And she'll be the first to admit that she even tried to hide it for a while, best she could. She tried to protect the kids from it for a while. And so that's the important piece, is that I want families to read this book and know that there's hope and help, but also that good, strong boundaries are the one thing that all addicts and alcoholics respond to. And you've got to have good, healthy, strong boundaries and maintain them.
Wisdom passed down from my grandfather is that good fences make for good neighbors.
That's right. That's so right.
And I think probably one of the reasons that, for me personally, that I love the family component of both the book and Athletes in Recovery, that when I was deployed, one of the heaviest things on my mind and heart, even once I got back, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be on my family. I wasn't married, didn't have kids. I was just a college student, but my parents, my sister, I don't know that my mom slept more than an hour a night the entire year that I was deployed. That is just something I think folks tend to not think about as much, as often as well, because it is tough. My brother-in-law is in the Navy, deployed all the time. My sister is basically a single mother for all of those deployments as well. So family is ever so important.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Can't imagine what they went through.
Well, we've talked about a lot. Folks, this was only a snippet of Randy's story, and it is an amazing, powerful story. And I encourage you all to go out and get that book. And Randy, you do speaking engagements as well. Am I not that correct?
No. And you can find me at randygrimespeaks.com, or just go on to proathletesinrecovery.org. You can find me there. And hey, if you can't find me on social media, you're not trying very hard, because I'm everywhere. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, Sober Center 60, LinkedIn, of course, Instagram, all that stuff. So I'm available, and I'm available for anybody. And not only me, but my wife is available too. She's a certified family addictions coach, and she loves that. She loves that role of working with families, of just guiding. And she's so good at telling people what she should have done. Looking back now, hindsight's 2020, and she knows now what she should have done. But at the time, she didn't know. She didn't know who to call, what to say, how to react. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to share with families, so they're not in the dark. And no matter where I speak, I could be speaking in a school, and I can ask a bleachers full of kids to raise their hand if they've been affected by addiction, and every hand will go up, because this is a disease that affects everybody, every community. And we've got to continue to fight this thing.
Absolutely. So to close out this episode, if you had a call to action, a message of hope, if you're going to remember one thing, remember this. What would it be?
That it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay, but you've got to put your hand up and ask for help. There is hope and help out there, but you've got to engage.
Wonderful. I'll second that right there with you. Wished I had known that and done that many years ago.
Me too.
It's been an honor. It's been an honor, and look forward to collaborating, partnering, crossing paths many times in the future.
I hope so. And good luck with your future endeavors. I know you got some big things coming up. So thank you. I'm grateful for this interview.
That concludes this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and share this episode with a friend before you leave. And we look forward to seeing you on social media, because prevention is better together. Together, we are stronger.